Welcome back, students, to Agriculture Form 3. We are here still to discuss on mushroom production. Last time, remember, we just started on this topic of mushroom production where we defined the term mushroom. Can you refresh your memory on the meaning of mushroom? Later on, we also discussed on the structure of mushroom. Remember, we categorized the mushroom into two parts. The structure of the mushroom was categorized into two, as the fruit or sporophyte, as well as the mycelium. Then we looked onto details of the parts of the mushroom and also discussed on their function. And also, remember, we looked on the life cycle of mushroom. I hope you are still remembering on the life cycle of the mushroom. Then, lastly, on the last topic, we looked on the importances of mushroom. So we looked on the importances of mushroom in three categories: as a source of food, as that is a nutritive value, as a economic value, as well as medicinal value. And now let us proceed looking on the same mushroom production, and we are on part 2. Let's find out what is in part 2. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to list husbandry practices for mushroom production, and you should also be able to describe mushroom species selection, and also you should be able to describe mushroom site selection. Be with me as we explore this lesson. So for mushroom production, there are several husbandry practices which we need to understand. We need to understand species selection. We need to understand site selection. We need to describe construction of incubation and production shells. Remember, mushrooms are cultivated in a house. So there is need of constructing the incubation as well as production shells. Apart from that, we need to understand how substrates are prepared, how substrates are treated, how substrates we seed, so seeding, substrate seeding, and we also need to understand how best we do manage mushroom fruiting. Once the mushroom they are grown into a fruit, how best can we take care of those fruits? And lastly, we also need to know how best we can harvest our mushroom. So these are the detailed husbandry practices. So from now, we'll be scrutinizing one husbandry practice after another. So we'll be describing one by one. As from the success criteria on our today's lesson, we'll spend much of our time describing on the species selection as well as site selection. So be with me as we proceed with our lesson. Let's start on the species selection. There are wide varieties of mushroom species and they are of different sizes. Some are thin, we call them thin mushrooms. We describe that they are thin mushrooms depending on the size of the cup or size of the stem. So their cup size is below 5 centimeters in diameter. So those are types of mushroom or species of mushrooms whose cups are below 5 centimeters diameter, we categorize them as thin mushrooms. So there are several varieties of mushroom with a thin mushroom. So a good example is enoki species. Enoki species. Then we have medium-sized mushroom. Medium-sized mushroom. Medium-sized mushroom, their cups are of the range between 5 to 10 centimeters in diameter. So the cups are of the range between 5 to 10 centimeters in diameter. Good example of the species and a medium-sized mushroom is Agaricus species. Then we have thick mushrooms. Thick mushrooms. Their cups ranges between 11 to 15 centimeters in diameter, or even above 15 centimeters in diameter. We have good examples of the species like Shiitake and Chinese species. On the pictures here, they are just showing some of the mushroom species which can be cultivated. This is the enoch, of which they are thin in size. The stem thin as well as in the cap is thin. So in enoch species, they look like this. Then we have Agaricus species. This is Agaricus species. Then we have Shiitake species, and this picture is for Chinese species. So you can check that in terms of the sizes are different. Some are very thin, some they are just medium, and some they are very thick. So since there are several varieties in terms of the shape, in terms of the color, therefore there is need of us to be selecting the mushrooms which we are going to grow. So there are factors to consider when selecting mushroom species. One of the factors we need to consider is temperature requirement. Temperature requirement. Remember, there are different varieties of the mushroom, and their temperature requirement also differs. Remember, last time we categorized the mushroom just into two, as button as well as the oyster mushroom. For oyster mushroom, their temperature requirement will reach as up to 30 degrees Celsius. So you check with the temperature. If the temperature in your area is as high as 30 degrees Celsius, it means you go for oyster mushroom. While button mushroom, we said that their temperature requirement is a little bit low, maximum of 20 degrees Celsius. So it means if you are living in the area where the temperature is low, you go for button mushroom in order for you to have high yield. And also another factor farmers need to consider when choosing the mushroom species is resource availability or capital. For oyster mushroom, remember we mentioned that there is low capital requirement. So if you have or low input requirement, if you have few resources or less capital, it means oyster mushroom is the best type of mushroom for you to grow. But if you have enough capital, you go for button. Then technical know-how is also another factor. Technical know-how. So it will depend on your skills now, managerial skills. If you are capable to grow oyster mushroom, it means you go for oyster. If you are capable enough to grow button mushroom, it means you go for button. Then it will depend on the size. Remember, we have thin, medium, and thick size. So it will depend on your preference. If you prefer thin mushroom, you cultivate enoki. If you prefer medium or thick, you choose those varieties which are of that size. And also it will depend on maturity. Different varieties or different mushroom species, they will not mature the same time. Some they'll mature fast, some medium, some they'll mature very late. So it will depend on your preference as well. If you need late, those which will mature late, you go for those varieties. If you prefer for those species which will mature very early, you go for the varieties. And also it will depend on market demand. It will depend on market demand. We are talking of consumers' preference or taste of consumer. So remember, in any enterprise which you want to engage yourself into, you should not forget doing market research. You should not forget doing market research. So on market research, you know the preference of consumers. If they'll need oyster, you grow oyster. If they'll need button mushroom, you go for button mushroom. Apart from that, it will depend on the value of the species. So different species of mushroom, they are of different value. Some they are of low value, some they are of high value. So you check on the species which are of high value, of course, if you want more to maximize profit. Apart from that, it will depend on the yield. Different mushroom species, obviously there will be different yield. So obviously if you are into business, you are going to select on the varieties which you yield more. So these are the factors one need to consider when you are selecting mushroom species to grow. Let us go into site selection. Remember, I mentioned last time that these mushrooms are cultivated in a house. So cultivated mushrooms are grown in a house. So it means that the house should provide conditions favorable for the growth of mushrooms. The house which you are going to construct, where you are going to cultivate your mushroom, should provide conditions favorable for the growth of mushrooms. So the important conditions for a good mushroom house are humidity, temperature, ventilation, moisture. So depending on the type of mushroom which you are going to grow, they will need different humidity, a certain amount of temperature, and a certain amount of ventilation, as well as the moisture. So at least the house which you are going to construct, where you are going to grow the mushroom, at least should have recommended humidity, temperature, ventilation, as well as moisture. And there are also factors to consider when selecting site for mushroom house. Earlier, we've just mentioned on the conditions a house where you're going to plant to cultivate your mushroom should have. But now, where should we construct a house? Where should we construct a mushroom house? So it should be away from livestock crows. It should be away from livestock pens. It should also be away from rubbish pit. A house should be constructed away from latrines. Why? This is to avoid attracting flies. Flies is pest number one which will attack our mushroom. So a mushroom house should be constructed from any source of uh, odor, of which those odor or bad smell will attract the flies. That's why we're saying that we need to construct these corals away, these mushroom houses away from livestock pens, away from rubbish pit, latrines. These three, they will attract flies. So we don't want our mushroom house to be contaminated with the flies. Apart from that, it should be near the market. It should be near the market. Our mushrooms, they are very delicate. They are perishable. They can easily go bad. So it should be near the market so as to sell them fast, since they are very perishable. So when you are constructing a mushroom house, make sure that you should be near the market so that you can easily reach the market. And also it should be near clean water supply. It should be near clean water supply. This is to avoid contamination during watering. It's just there to avoid contamination during watering. Another factor we need to consider when we are selecting a site where to construct a mushroom house is that it should be near dense forest. The house should be near, just near, not under the dense forest, but just near the dense forest. The main reason is to provide ideal conditions for mushroom growth. Mushroom don't need conducive humidity as well as temperature. Remember, the temperature should be low. And to have better humidity, to have low temperature, the forest will provide that ideal condition. So that's why the house should be near the dense forest. Apart from that, another factor to consider is the climatic condition itself. A warm, rainy, humid, and cool temperature is needed. So these are some of the factors to consider when you are selecting a site where to construct a mushroom house. Let's now construct the house. We have selected the species which we want to grow. We have selected so far the site where we need to grow to construct a house. Now let's go and construct the house. So mushroom house, they can be in two categories. What we call an incubation house as well as a production house. We have an incubation house as well as a production house. An incubation house, it's where now we put our mycelium. We put our mycelium and it's like a waiting house so that the mycelium should grow into primordia. Remember the life cycle of mushroom? From mycelium, it turns into primordial mushroom. So in order for this process to take place, we put the mycelium into an incubation house. In an incubation house, usually should be enclosed, and there should be total darkness. There should be total darkness in an incubation house. While a production shed or a production house, This one should have light. We need light in a production house. So once the primordial mushroom has been formed from incubation house, it is transferred to the production house so that it grows into a mushroom, a fruit. It grows into a fruit. So what are the materials which can be used for construction of incubation and production shed? So we need poles, we need heavy gauge plastic sheets, we need glass, touching glass, we need bamboos, we need timber, we need nails, we need wire of plastic gauze. So these are some of the materials, simple materials which we can use to construct a simple incubation house as well as a simple production house. So let's now construct the incubation and production shed. On the picture here should be the incubation house. We are using the black plastic sheet, so that, remember, we said that incubation house, there should be total darkness. So that's why a black sheet, so that there should be no light entering into this incubation house. So when you are constructing, we need to consider siting. And remember, we mentioned that this should be free from any obstruction. Remember, we mentioned that should be near the dense forest, but not under the dense forest, as the house should be constructed with no any obstruction. And when we are constructing, the ventilators and doors should face in the direction of the wind to allow free air movement. So ventilators and doors should always face in the direction of the wind so as to allow free air movement. Remember, the house should be constructed away from livestock crops, rubbish pits, and latrine to avoid attraction of flies to the mushrooms. Let's do the framework. When constructing an incubation house as well as the production shed, we cannot run away from the framework. So the house should have a wooden framework covered with a heavy gauge plastic sheet. This heavy gauge plastic sheet controls humidity, and also should have outer grass thatch for insulation. Most of the times, we need the grass. We need to thatch our house with the glass. This thatching glass is much more recommended in a mushroom house. The main reason, it will regulate temperature. The thatching glass will regulate temperature. If you have ever compared the two houses, the house with the iron sheet and the house with the thatching glass, you will agree with me. For the house which it has the iron sheet on the roof, most of the times the temperature fluctuates much. The temperature easily change, and it will depend on the temperature outside the that house. If the temperature is too high, then in that house with the iron sheet, automatically the temperature increases. And also, if the temperature is too low, it changes to too low, the temperature in that house automatically changes also into too low. But that is not the case with the house which is thatched with glass, the temperature is regulated. If outside the temperature is too high, at least the temperature is regulated. It's not too much as high as the outside temperature. If the temperature is also too low outside, the temperature in the house is also not that low. So grass, the outer part of the house should be thatched with the glass just for insulation reason. It regulates temperature. Let us now look in terms of the dimension. When we are constructing an incubation house as well as the production shed, we need to measure. That's very vital as well. Of course, for incubation house, most times can be smaller than the production shed. As the incubation house, the mushroom are at a tender age and they are not growing that big. But for the production house, at least should be much more bigger. So, of course, on dimension, it will depend on the whichever size you are looking for. So if it is a smaller house, it can be 5 meters by 3 meters by 2 meters. 5 meters in terms of length, 3 meters in terms of width, and 2 meters in terms of height. That is for the smaller houses. And for larger ones, the minimum can be 7 meters by 5 meters by 4 meters. It can be even more than that, depending on the quantity of the mushroom you want it to produce. So we are talking of 7 meters length, 5 meters width, and 3 meters high. That is for larger ones. But we are not limited. These ranges just because for the mushroom we need to manage them, to handle them with care. When we are producing mushroom, we need to handle them with care. So if the house is too big, it will be difficult for us to manage all our mushroom, to take care of all our mushroom. But we need to construct manageable houses. Apart from that, we need the shelves. When we are growing the mushroom, we just don't grow them down. Most of the times, we use the bags. In those bags, we hang them. On the shelves. So when we are constructing the house, we need to consider also the dimensions of the shelves where we are going to hang our bags. So the width of shelves ranges from 0.2 meters to 1 meter depending on the fruiting bags sizes. So that's it on the construction of the incubation as well as the production sheds. So that makes the end of our today's lesson. So far, we've looked on the factors to consider when selecting the species, mushroom species which you want to grow. We have also discussed on siting, more special factors to consider when you are selecting the site where you are going to construct the house, as well as even the conditions recommended in the house where we are going to grow the mushroom. And also, we have not stopped there. We have also discussed on how best we can construct the mushroom house. Remember, we are saying that the mushroom house can be 2 houses. We need 2 houses as an incubation house, that is the germinating house, which we prefer should be total darkness in it, and also a production shed where the mushroom will be growing, primordial mushroom will be growing into a bigger fruit. So if there are any questions, you can use the WhatsApp number displayed there, or you can just visit Xulendo online to repeat the same lesson for you to fully understand. And these are the resources which we use to come up with our today's lesson. You are free to go through these resources for your deeper understanding. You were with me, your usual teacher, Mrs. Mawowa. We are going to stop here up until we meet in our next lesson, that is part 3, mushroom production, where we are going to discuss more on how best we can manage our mushroom. Till then, goodbye.